Okay, good morning and welcome to what's the first of actually 5 webinars we're going to be doing, dealing with roadway departures. We'll be talking about that a little bit more here as we go through the course of the day. So I just want you to all on the same page kind of thing. My name is David Orr. I'm the director here with the New York State LTAP Cornell Local Roads Program. I apologize. Some of you have probably noticed we have an odd issue with our website. It's actually Amazon Web Services. It's where the problem is. They haven't fixed it for us yet. So I apologize for that. And if you have colleagues who missed out for some reason with this webinar, it is going to be posted on our website once it's up and running, and that should be just in a day or two. Um, and of course, we can always answer your questions via email and things like that. So what are we doing here? Well, we're talking about roadway departures. So we're going to be doing the first half of this webinar on dealing with combating roadway departures. And then the second half, we're going to be talking about a call for funds that New York State is doing through their Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. There is a handout. If you open up your chat pod, that chat pod in the background, magically, with my hands not touching anything, Jody Angelo is going to pop in a link, and she'll do that a couple of times during the thing. You can download this. It's got resource links. You're definitely going to want to have that. And it's got links to our Safer Roads and Streets workshop, the state's roadway departure safety action plan, and the proven countermeasures from the Federal Highway Administration, as well as some other links, which we'll talk about during the course of our time together this morning. Now, we are going to be doing polls. We're going to be asking folks to raise and lower their hands. So typical stuff that we do in webinars. Now, I do have a caveat before we get started. I'm going through this based upon discussions with the state DOT about the call for papers or call for money. But I want you to realize what I'm saying, if there's something that's an interpretation, an official thing, you'll need to send an email in so that we can make sure we get that correct. And there is a place on the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan website, which is linked in that resource page, that takes you to a Q&A. And if there's any additional Q&A that comes out of these webinars, those will be added to that as well. And of course, at the end of this, we also have 2 folks from the state DOT who are going to join us to answer your questions, Robert Zatowski and Andrew Sattinger. So if you have a question, open up your Q&A pod through the course of this webinar. I'll answer the ones I can't. If I can't answer it, we'll leave it active and we'll get those answered before we leave today, or we'll get them posted later on. Okay, so a couple of welcomes. I want to see who's on the call and just ask a few questions. You guys have probably all done this before, so I got to clear the responses. Who do you work for? Do you work? Uh, I clicked on that too fast. Hang on. Boop, boop. Okay, so who do you work for? Town, county, city, village, state, fed, consulting firm, contractor? Do you work for the weekend? We have at least a couple of people who work for the weekend. That's fine. I had run this last night for a class that I teach here on campus, which is why it was loaded with data. So sorry about that. Okay. And if you can't get into the Poll Everywhere website, which is polleverywhere.com/DavidOrPE, um, then just put it into the Q&A and I can sort of go through and clean that up. So we have a person who works for a town, some consultants. Okay, that's good. Okay, good to know. Okay. What is your job? What do you do for that agency? We have, a good mixture of folks from state, county, things like that. What do you do? Are you an administrator, a highway superintendent? Are you the DPW commissioner, an engineer, a planner? Are you actually in the field crew or board member? Okay, we got a board member. That's good. Oh, no, it's a none of the above. If you do none of the above, do me a favor and throw it into the Q&A so I can get a sense of what your job is. Okay. Okay, cool. And those can all be cleared. Okay. And then to see where we are across the state. So you can actually click on this one. This is sort of fun. You can actually click and can see where y'all are from. Okay. We'll see if someone clicks where I was yesterday. I bet I should know. I should see that. Yep, there we go. I was actually over yesterday in Greene County doing a class. Okay. Okay, cool. Now, why are we dealing with roadway departures? We actually did a series of 4 webinars back in the fall. We're doing 5 additional ones now. There's a big call for funds. There's a federal call for funds. Why? Well, we're trying to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. Okay? Before COVID hit, the numbers were dropping. They were getting close to 30,000 people a year killed on roads in the United States. We really want that number to be 0, but we're doing what we can. After COVID, there was a big spike. There's a lot of reasons why that occurred, but the big thing is we're now over 40,000 people killed annually nationwide. New York's actually in pretty good shape. We're down under 1,000, but that's still way too many. And Federal Highway has 3 focus areas that they're looking at: roadway departures, intersections, and bicycle and pedestrians. And they're starting here in New York with a specific plan to focus on the roadway departures because it's about 40% of the fatalities on the roads here in New York State. Part of the reason for that is we have some big cities. We're actually a fairly urban state. If we did not have those urban areas, we would actually be a focus state for roadway departures, if you run the math. So it's something that's pretty important. Nationally, roadway departures make up more than half of all of the fatalities. But again, because of the urban nature of a large part of New York, but we still have way too many. And that's something we can work on by having good plans and doing proven countermeasures. Now, when it comes to roadway departures, the big 3, the things that cause most of the fatalities and the serious injuries, are head-on crashes, rollover crashes, and hitting fixed objects, specifically trees. Okay? So, just as a reminder, and we'll see how these videos play, there's always a challenge when you do a video on a webinar. A head-on crash, okay, this is still going to be considered a roadway departure, but anytime someone leaves their lane uncontrolled, that's counted as a roadway departure. In this case, it was a medical emergency, and the person just literally fell asleep at the wheel and they hit a school bus. The cars did their job. The kids were safe in the bus because they had on their seatbelts, so there's no serious injuries, but still, that's a crossover head-on crash. Okay? Um, we can have rollover crashes. Okay? So in this particular case, somebody coming onto an interstate caused somebody to change lanes. They didn't look, and this lady wound up rolling 17 times. And of course, that's a lane departure or a roadway departure. Even though she came back in the roadway, it was definitely not done under control. And luckily, again, the equipment in the vehicle helped keep her from serious injuries, though she probably doesn't like hamster balls anymore. And then finally, of course, fixed objects. By far the worst fixed object to hit is trees. Um, I do not want to get rid of trees. That's not the point here. The point is to understand and try to deal with the most critical items that we can deal with. And we certainly know that high speed makes a big difference with trees. Anything above 30, 40 miles an hour is going to lead probably to a fatality or a serious injury. One of the things that's interesting, people go, well, that's a rural problem. Actually, about half, 45%, at least the last time I was able to get good statistics, 45% of the fatalities hitting trees occur inside urban areas. So trees, where they're placed matters, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, both today and in some of the other upcoming webinars. Now, New York State has a roadway departure safety action plan. If you go look at the handout, and it's going to magically show up in the chat pod if you hadn't opened up your chat pod yet, that roadway departure safety action plan talks about a whole bunch of different factors. We'll go through those. One of the things I would advise you to do, though, is make sure you also look at the appendices that are there. Read through the appendices. There's some really good information there. So you want to make sure you look at both of those. And now we're focusing our efforts on what are called, and this is purposeful here, KIA, KA, FA, KI little a, all kinds of names for it, designations. K means killed. You might see an F in some older reports. You're going to see I with an A behind it, which means a serious crash, catastrophic crashes, things that are life-changing, okay? Those are all things that we can deal with. But I want you to note, and you'll see this in the roadway departure plan, you'll actually see that just coded as KA. There's just a single set of letters for the injuries. It means the same thing. So if I say KIA, if I say KA, or if I say K, big I, little a, That means fatalities and the serious injuries, the kinds that change people's lives, losses of limbs, things that lead to chronic illnesses and injuries. Okay, so what does that mean in New York State? Well, if you look at the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, you'll actually see some statistics, and you can do the math, and you can actually get them on something called CLEAR, which we'll talk about in a minute. But you can see if you look at that, we're over 2,500 fatalities and serious injuries here in New York State due to roadway departures, how they're coded when the crash occurs. And yes, there's a dip in 2024. I don't put any accountants in a 1 year dip. There's lots of reasons you can get a 1 year dip. We need a long-term trend, and if you look, the long-term trend is actually relatively flat or actually going slightly up until this past year. So we can work on trying to get rid of these kinds of crashes. So based on what I've said so far, our first sort of real poll, this is a Q&A kind of question or a PDH question. Why does New York State DOT and Federal Highway want to focus on the KI kind of crashes? What do you think their reason is for doing that? See what y'all think. And some of it comes back to the concept of vision zero or towards zero deaths. We want to do what we can to not have anybody have a fatality or a serious crash. We want everybody to go home safely every single day. And yes, there's some liability concerns. And of course, we definitely want to focus on the priority incidents because they have the highest impact. Because saving those lives actually does save money for everyone. Great answers. Great answers. Okay. So again, that's what we're trying to focus on. So if we look at it from the standpoint, it's the cost and long-term consequences. We don't want to change people's lives. We'll actually trade, don't always want to hear this, but we'll trade some minor fender benders for those serious crashes if we need to. And so the roadway departure concept comes about that we're going to keep the vehicle on the road, keep them in their lane, keep them where they belong. If we can do that, we're going to get rid of the roadway departure crashes. If they do leave the road for some reason, we want to reduce the potential for that crash. We don't want them to go off the road. And then if they do have to have a crash, if it does occur, we want to minimize the severity. So again, it's only property damage, that they walk away and the only thing they have to worry about is the scrape on the car or replacing a tire. Okay? So we're going to keep the vehicle on the road by countermeasures such as stripes and signs and other things to help people stay in their lane, rumble strips. We're going to reduce the potential for a crash by having good clear zones and making sure that anything that is in the clear zone is breakaway. So that you're not really crashing into anything. The vehicle can safely stop. And then if they do have a crash, we want to minimize the severity by making sure those breakaway things don't lead to a snagging issue or that there's no trees within the area where they want to stop. Okay? So there's an overlap, I know, between the minimize the severity and the reduce the potential and even keeping the vehicle on the road, and that's one of the challenges that occurs. But we want to make sure people do the right thing. And of course, we'll revisit sites as we look at them. So in terms of keeping the vehicle on the road, obviously stripes and signs are our primary things that we're going to be dealing with, but good friction can make a difference as well. Um, in terms of reducing the potential for the crash, and again, we'll be brave and try a video here. We've all seen this where a vehicle goes off the edge of the road, and what do people try to do? They try to turn their wheel back up. And if they turn their wheel back up too much, they finally do come back on the road and they can lose control. Okay, and there have been plenty of tests done. This is a video from the 80s. You can tell about the car type. And that would be someone who would have swung right into the other lane and could have led it to a head-on, a rollover, lots of things there with the edge that you're going to deal with. And then finally, minimize the severity of the crash. So putting up the proper barrier, if you're going to put up rail, guide rail is put up, we want to make sure it's put up properly so you have the deflection distance. The deflection distance for most W-beam guide rail with on light post is, 5 to 8 feet. In this particular case, the rail would actually help deflect the vehicle right into that tree. It would actually be more dangerous to have the rail with that tree than having no rail at all. And so we really want to minimize the severity by using the tools we've got in the proper way. Okay? And these are all what are known as proven countermeasures. Now, when I was in school, I learned the 3 E's. These days we talk about the 4Es. This is described in the Highway Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. And the 4Es that we usually talk about today are education, engineering, enforcement, and emergency response, getting to people within the golden hour. The problem is over time, we've become siloed. We've started going, well, we've done our education piece. We're done. The enforcement people will take care of their thing. And what we've done is we haven't realized we need to talk across these boundaries. We need to get rid of those silos. So education is not just for the highway people, the folks like you that are on today's webinar, but it's the public. It's all of us who are engaged in these activities and communicating across those boundaries. That's actually part of the education process. We need to have engineering involved, yes, but that engineering needs to be thinking about the human factors and the fact that we have to actually do a little bit of education as we're putting these things in so people don't go, ooh, I don't want a roundabout. Ooh, I hate rumble strips. They have their place, and we need to talk about it. We need to make sure that enforcement is part of it, but a well-designed road is sort of self-enforcing. And we don't have to have police out there to enforce it. The roadway itself is part of the enforcement problem and solution. And then finally, emergency response. We certainly want to get to people within the golden hour, and we want to come up with mechanisms to make sure that that occurs in a good, productive way. So what Federal Highway has started pushing for is something known as the safe systems approach. And that means you're still going to have the same 4Es of education, engineering, enforcement, and emergency response, but you're also going to look at the vehicles themselves, and you're going to look at everything holistically. So you might wind up with a situation where you think about how do we make sure the vehicles stay safe? How does the road work with the particular vehicle? Okay? The real idea behind all of this is a redundancy, sometimes called the Swiss cheese model. So imagine essentially someone's going too fast. They're a little bit intoxicated, inebriated, distracted because they're on the phone. The vehicle itself, maybe the tires aren't the best. But if we've done our job with a good, safe road, they still walk away. If we can get to them quick enough, we can get them post-crash care. They can still not have a catastrophic injury. So that redundancy makes a huge difference, okay? And so that's something we want to keep in mind as we move forward. So this is part of a longer video. Well, watch this lady. This is actually just a human factors issue, okay? She ran off the road. She had a diabetic issue. She drove right through a sign. Watch carefully. And I'm going to back this up just so you can see. This is worth repeating. Watch carefully what happens. She hits the signpost. That signpost is a pretty hefty one because it's a big sign. But instead of damaging the vehicle, it breaks away. So that redundancy did its job. Yes, she was going too fast because of a medical issue, but the roadway kept her safe. And then, obviously, right behind her was this trooper who got her emergency care and wound up with a happy ending. And we really like to see things like that. So, going to make you try to remember 2 slides ago. See if you can tell me what are the 5 components of a safe systems approach. And you can, again, if you can't put it into the poll everywhere, go ahead and throw it into the Q&A. Let's see what you guys come up with. Engineering, very good. I'll live with that. Education. Okay, those are the E's. And enforcement. So we got the 3 E's. Emergency response. Safe road users. Very good. Okay. Looking for one more. Ah, there it is, the vehicles. Again, we use different words. We're meaning somewhat the same thing. Okay. The components of the safe systems really comes down to 5 factors. They're overlapping with the old 4 E's. It's the safe road users, the safe vehicles, um, safe speeds, post-crash care or emergency response. All of these things together combine to have good, safe systems. Okay. Now, one other thing I want to give you a tool that you should have in your toolkit is known as systemic safety. Okay. And the idea behind systemic safety is we don't wait for the crash to occur. What we do is we go out and we find the places on our system where there's a higher chance of a crash occurring, like rolling some dice. So here's a map of crashes that were fatal from the Federal uh, Fatality Accident Record System, FARS. And we're going to look at where the crashes occurred in 2012 to 2014. And you go, where do I want to treat this? Where do I want to spend my money? Well, your brain might go, well, let me see. I think I've got, let me get a good color here. We'll go with black. That's a good color. I got a couple that look like they're close here near Ithaca. I got a couple more that are close over towards Dryden, and again the other overlaps. Oh, maybe there's one overlap here, not too far from Franklin. But when you start actually measuring the distances, they're actually pretty far apart. Now there may be hotspots, and we'll talk about the state's hotspot analysis if you add in serious crashes. But a lot of times, especially in the rural system, there may not be as many hotspots as you think. And so the idea behind systemic safety is, yes, we treat the hotspots, but we also want to look at those places that have a higher chance of risk. Okay, so we're going to illustrate that. We're going to try something. Usually I do this in person with a bunch of dice, but what we're going to do is we're going to play a little virtual dice roll game and see what goes on here. So what I want you to do is first, I want you to choose a number from this list. Pick any of the numbers from 20 to 25. Pick a number. Okay, get that number in your head. Now choose a vowel. Okay, so Vanna White's going to turn the vowels for you. Okay, so now, how many of you chose, I got to turn the pen back on, and I got to pick a different color. How many of you chose 23I? Raise your hand if you chose 23I. Okay, I got 3 of you, 4 of you, 5. You got a big crowd today, so, when you get a big crowd, you're going to get quite a few folks who did 23I. So I got 4 of you who kept your hands up. I don't have the money to fix everything, so we're going to have a plan. So we're going to do 2 of you. I will do, let's see, we'll do Tina and Andrew. Okay, we're gonna have your problems fixed. We're gonna go fix your problems. Okay, so that's good. Everybody's in good page. We're gonna be doing that good. Okay, good. Okay, so now let me come in here. Okay, now this time I want you to pick a number. Choose a number again. So choose a number, any number you want. Just pick a number. Okay, and then I want you to choose another vowel or the same vowel. I don't care. Just pick one. And then I'm going to pick a random from my end. And how about 22? Oh, I turn my pen back on. 22, still an I. That's the nature of randomness, 22I. So raise your hand if you got 22I. So we spent the money to fix the problems for 2 people or 2 locations. But the next time the crash occurred, it was in a different spot. That's the nature of a lot of especially roadway departure crashes. They're semi-random. Again, there may be some hot spots, but what we can do is we can chase these problems and come in afterwards. And then you just get we have to wait till there is a crash? Well, the answer is no. And the way this works is you focus on the critical locations before a crash occurs by looking at those crash types that are either really common or those locations that have higher risk. It's a really pretty cool technique. So what you can start doing is looking for common or overrepresented crashes. Okay? A perfect example, this is outlined in the roadway departure plan. It's also some studies that actually predate that a little bit, but that's pretty cool. So let's look at curve radii here in New York State. This is on the state system. And we're going to look at the relatively sharp curves that exist. Okay, so of all the curves that exist in the New York State system, about 7% are curves that have only 100 to 300 foot radius. About 10% are 300 to 500 foot radius, 6% are 500 to 700 foot radius, and 5% up to about 960. Um, so if everything was equal, there was no increased risk based on the curve radius, we would expect the percentage of fatal crashes to be the same, 7%, 10%, 6%, and 5%. But instead, here's the data. 12% of the fatal crashes are occurring on those sharp corners. 12% are occurring on the 3 to 500 foot curves, and 7% on the 5 to 700. And then finally, by the time you start getting pretty flat curves, you see less crashes than the number of curves. So what do we want to do? Well, let's focus on where we have more crashes than we would anticipate just based on the number of curves, those sharp corners. And that makes sense. We all can intuitively understand that. But by going out looking at data, we might find that on our system, it's the lane width that matters, or the shoulder width, or shoulder type. And that's what the state went out and did on all the state system, because they had good data. And then you can apply that to your local system as well and come up with a plan. So as an example, from the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan for major collectors, federal designation, if the speed of the road is higher, the 50 and 55-mile-an-hour roads, and the traffic volumes are under 5,000, they're surprisingly overrepresented when there's sharp curves and narrow shoulders. Pretty much what you might expect. And so you can develop a plan to start working on proven countermeasures on those locations and the ones that would fix curve radius problems and narrow shoulder problems. And those are the things we're going to be talking about in those upcoming webinars. So, what are some common risk factors on your roads and streets? What are some common risk factors? Let's see what y'all come up with. Yeah, yeah. Narrow pavements, lack of lighting, sharp curves, trees, worn pavements. Yeah, you can start developing what the most common risk factors are. And when you look at local road safety plans that have been developed, both in New York State and in other states, you start to see there are certain commonalities that show up. Okay? So, for instance, speed. We know speed's an issue. Traffic volume. More traffic, more exposure, more likely you're going to have a problem. Lane width matters. Shoulder width matters. Shoulder type can matter too. What's the width of the clear zone? Which of course is an issue with right-of-way. Okay? A deep ditch somebody put over in the Q&A. Curves and their associated radius. An improper super elevation. You could even include previous crashes. Now, some will argue, and I actually tend to agree with them a little bit, that a previous crash in of itself is not a risk factor, but it might be, because it might be a hotspot issue. And as a communication tool with the public, it's probably vital that we include previous crashes, because then they realize, yes, crashes, we're going to make sure we look at the places where crashes occurred. And if we miss some factor, it might show up as a hotspot issue. So again, you make a list of common risk factors. So just as an example, what's the most deadly fixed object? Do you remember? What's the most deadly fixed object? And while y'all are putting your answers in, somebody asked a really good question. How do you deal with narrow right-of-way in a danger spot? That's why you have to develop a plan so that you can deal with those kind of things and find some funding to help improve those spots. And yes, you can use the HSIP call for funds to do some right-of-way if you need to. In fact, we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the call here in just a couple of minutes. Okay. So some proven countermeasures. There's a whole list of them out there. This is just a list of some of the ones that are the most common that we see people implement around the state on the local system. We will have webinars discussing all of the ones that are listed in the state's highway safety improvement roadway departure safety action plan, but there are lots of others out there. Federal Highway Administration has 28 of them that include roadway departures, intersections, pedestrians, and we're just looking at the roadway departure ones right now. And if you look at the handout, it has links to both the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan and the Federal Highway Administration's proven countermeasures. You're absolutely going to want to look at that and join us over the next few weeks for 4 additional webinars, 3 specifically on proven countermeasures. We're going to talk a week from now on signs, signing, delineation, and lighting issues. We're then going to be doing pavement and geometric issues on the 29th, the following Tuesday. And then what do we do to improve the chances of a safe recovery? That'll be on May 1st. Because we've had a lot of people ask this question, and while it's ancillary in some respects, we are going to do a special webinar on the use of the ball bank to determine the safe advisory speed for curves, because there's a lot of folks who had questions about that, so we're doing a special webinar to make sure people are on the same page on how to do that on May 6th. And we hope to see you at one of those. So now we're about halfway through, so it's perfect timing. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about money. Everybody likes money, right? Raise your hand if you like money. If everybody doesn't raise their hand, I'm concerned. Everybody should raise your hand. And I'm also doing this because I'm going to ask you to raise your hand a couple of other times. Okay. Now, magically, all hands are going to get lowered. But so there are 2 calls for funds out right now. Okay. One of them is from the SS4A. We'll talk about that in a sec. The other one is the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. Realize in both cases, the money coming in are linked to federal dollars, which means it is a local federal aid project. What that means is you have to go through the procedures for local federal aid, which means it is a reimbursement program. You have to have enough cash to get the project moving, and you will get reimbursed on a pretty frequent basis, but you have to have that cash carrying capability. And there are going to be steps in the process where you have to get authorization first. Okay? So just want you to realize there's federal dollars tied in this, and there's a process involved. I have good news in a minute, but before I get there, let me ask you, which of these do you think would be a federally eligible project? Bridge replacement on a local road, new sidewalks to a school, rehab of a low-volume road, safety improvements at the an intersection, or signal replacements at the mall? Which do you think you could actually use those federal dollars for? And just federal projects in general. And some of you are, especially on the consulting side, I expect you know that all bridges are eligible if there was a bridge call. We don't have one that we're talking about today, though there may be bridge calls in other ways. But yeah, all bridges are eligible. That's structures over 20 feet, by the way, because of the way the federal system is set up. Bridge definitions do vary. New sidewalks to a school, that's a safety improvement. Yeah, that would always be included. There may be some limitations, and there are some with the 2 calls that are out right now. You need to be aware of those in what are known as the Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO. Rehab of a low-volume road? Yeah, unless it has a safety component. A rehab or a paving project? No, these funds would not be eligible. If you were doing something to improve safety, and we will be talking about when we do the proven countermeasures, then yes, it could be eligible. But just a general rehab, no. But the good news is if you're doing a rehab already and you're using local funds to do the work and you want to add some safety components to it, the safety components you could fund. So if you were doing a complete road and while you were at it, you were going to replace all the signs and fix all the rail and widen the corners, the rail portion, the sign portion, and the improving the width portions might be possible to be improved if you can show there's a true safety thing on it. And it will be very dependent upon the project specifics, okay? And so we'll leave the top question in there, but I'll answer the second one that's in the Q&A right now. All could be eligible depending on project specifics. Well, yes, but generally the good rule of thumb is for federal dollars, bridges and safety are always going to be true on every road. But you have to then tie it back in, and you have to show it meets the Notice of Funding Opportunities. So the one from the USDOT, it's actually straight from the USDOT. The money comes directly to the local government. You still have to meet the federal process. And in this particular case, if you have a local road safety plan, and we'll talk about those more, you can go ahead and implement projects, get an implementation grant. Okay. If you don't have a local road safety plan, then you're going to want to apply for a planning grant to develop one, or you could do a demonstration grant to try something out. Maybe you like, we don't have a plan, but we've thought about doing rumble strips, or we thought about putting in a rotary, a roundabout. Okay, you could do a demonstration. Heck, you could even do that even if you have a plan, but you're just not sure of some of the details. Now, if you're wondering about that particular one, that notice of funding opportunity is open. The deadline is June 26th, and there are 3 webinars coming up talking about implementation grants, developing local road safety action plans, and then a supplemental planning and demonstration activities webinar as well. If you're like, we're just not quite ready. So you definitely want to sign up for those and look those over. And again, there's links in the handout, and you can go find those out. But what I really want to do is make sure we talk about the roadway departure local call for projects from New York State DOT. Okay? Now, if you have any questions on any of this, obviously we'll help you answer any questions as well, but I definitely want you to make sure you realize that you can send an email directly to Andrew Sattinger. He will be joining us. He's actually a panelist today here in about 15 minutes to answer any questions that you've got, so please feel free to throw them into the Q&A pod. You can also go to the local call webpage, and again, that's directly on the handout, okay? Now, when we're talking about roadway departures, the question that was sitting in the Q&A says, roadway departure plan, what is meant by flattening? Flattening is usually the side slope, so that if the vehicle runs off the road, the slope is flattened, so it's safer for them if they go off the roadway, okay? Again, think about roadway departures, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape to deal with things like that. It might include some super elevation issues, but it's really looking at the whole pavement, including the side of the roadway, because it's a roadway departure issue. In this case, reducing the chances of a crash, or at least the severity of the crash. Now, in terms of the funds, $90 million. Good. Thumb up. Yep, thumb up. Okay. It is for local roads. That means county, town, city, village, or you could go through your Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO. Those are the people who are eligible to apply for the funds. $10 million has been set aside specifically for developing a local road safety plan. So if you do not have a local road safety plan, there is money available. So let me just find out, how many of you have a local road safety plan? So here's your choices. I'll let you put them in, and then I'll show the results. The answer is yes. Yes with another agency or MPO. No, not sure, working on one, and other. If you do other, you need to put in the Q&A. And then I'm going to look at the answers you guys are putting into the Q&A. And then I will go down and show the results. And the answers are, as expected, all over the map. So some of you have a plan. You can implement it. There's funds for that. Yes, with other agencies. We actually like that. We think actually bundling with other agencies, whether you do it through your MPO or just as at a county level, is an excellent idea, because you're actually going to get better data as well. If you don't have a plan, there's a chance to go get one, okay? And a safety action plan is going to be similar, but not exactly the same, but actually is eligible under this particular call if it's a locally developed plan. If it's data-driven, that's the key. Is it data-driven? If you're not sure, go find out. It's really important to find out if you're part of a plan, and again, if you need to have one. And if you're working on one, again, if you can get it finished in time, you might be eligible in this particular case. And then, again, 2 of you said other. Again, if you throw that in the Q&A, we'll try to figure out whether or not that counts in this particular case. So what I want to do is make sure everybody's on the same page for what is eligible. So there are 4 places within this call where you're going to be eligible for funds. One will be a hotspot analysis done by the state as part of the development of the plan. One is criterion that New York State DOT developed during the action plan. And then if you have a local road safety plan or something that's data-driven. And finally, all of this needs to be having proven countermeasures, okay? So all of this needs to have proven countermeasures. Now, let's go look at these, and then I'll catch a couple of your questions over in the Q&A. And again, we can't answer them. We'll answer them in the end here, the last 5-10 minutes. The hotspots, what New York State did is, in this case, they looked at all roads, not just state roads, all roads. Okay, they did a statewide review. They looked at the crash information that was available through something called CLEAR, which we'll talk about a little bit more here. And they looked for things that were flagged as possible roadway departure crashes in the accident reports or crash reports. And then they said which segments have higher crash rates. And they broke the roads into segments and to look for ones with higher crash rates. And so if you imagine there's a density, crash density, this is just the old bell curve you learned in school, and you segment the roads up, you determine the crash rate, and you determine a distribution. Now, we're assuming everything is a nice normal distribution. It probably isn't. But from the standpoint of what we're looking at, it actually works out pretty well when you calculate the mean and the standard deviation. And what the state is saying is, if you're having a much higher rate than expected, we want to fix those. And so they broke it into two hotspot location categories. One is you're more than 2 standard deviations above the average. So your crash rate is more than twice the statewide average. We definitely want to fix those. It's only about 2% of the segments on the local system and state system. Okay? The secondary choice is, okay, we want to also look at those roads that are 1 standard deviation above the expected rate for the particular type of crash. And that would be about 16% of the crashes that occur in that particular zone. So as part of developing the release for the call for funds, the state put together a HSIP action plan viewer. Okay? Now, there's some layers that are being added to break out different types of crashes, but the layers have eligible locations, DOT regional boundaries, civil boundaries, indigenous or Native American territories that exist within New York State, so you can find your location pretty quickly. And so, just as an example of how you would use this, um, I'll just, I live here in Ithaca, so let's say I did a search for Ithaca. Okay, so if I do a search for Ithaca, the city boundary pops up. I could have chosen the town, a different boundary would have popped up, but I live in the city, so I chose the city boundary. I then zoomed into my neighborhood, and on that map, you'll see a couple of blue lines. Those blue lines are local roads that are eligible under the secondary crash density criteria. They're not federal aid by any stretch. In fact, if you go down and look, this is a road not too far from where I live, near an elementary school in my neighborhood. And you can pop and click on it, and it will pop up information about that segment. Okay, this is Ridgedale Road between Valley and Elmwood. And it has who's the jurisdiction, the functional class, and it's a local road. Okay, but it would be eligible as a hotspot because it's got a slightly higher rate of crashes than we might anticipate. Now, I used to work and live in Yates County over in Penn Yan. Actually, I lived near Dundee for a while. But let's look at Yates County. If you look at Yates County, I've zoomed out. I tried initially searching for Yates, by the way, and I got the town of Yates. So I then searched for Penn Yan and then zoomed out to find Yates County. You can see there's both green and blue segments in this particular case. And the green ones are the higher priority ones, where there's a much higher rate than we might anticipate. So let's zoom into a particular road. In this case, we're going to zoom into County Route 1, Himrod Road. It's a major collector, okay? And you can find that by going to the functional classification viewer, which is also linked in your handout. And it would be eligible under the primary crash density criteria, okay? Because it's got a higher rate by quite a bit than the expected rate statewide. So that's eligible, those spots, okay? So hotspots is 1. So see if you remember what percentage of your segments are hotspots. And while you do that, I'll look at some of your questions. Somebody in their thing asked about posting a link to the action plan viewer. Jody's going to repost the handout link. Go to the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan website, and there's a link directly from that, just so you know. And then let's see what you guys came up with for answers. And yep, did good. Nice job. 2%, okay, is for the primary hotspots. 16% would be the secondary spots. So yeah, so a lot of roads will be eligible. Okay. Now, if you also want to, you could actually look at roads that fit underneath the analysis the state did on the state system, where they looked at risk factors, that local road safety plan concept. They applied it to the entire system, but only on the state system because they only had the data on the state system. So they found certain eligible location types. So if you have rural major collectors, if you have rural minor arterials, if you have an urban principal arterial, you would be eligible for certain types of crashes, and you'll need to read Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan to look those up. But let's go back and look at the New York State Functional Classification Viewer. And again, there's a link to that on that Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan page. And go down to that same Himrod Road and you click, it's a rural major collector. Hey, so we'd be eligible under that criterion as well. So there's two different ways to approach this. And want to make sure you keep that in mind. Again, when you are looking at eligibility under this criterion, make sure you review the appendices that are in the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan systemic program. Make sure you've done that because it will vary depending upon the classification of roadway, what the criterion are in your particular case. And if we had 2 hours, we could talk about all of them. And we'll cover some of these in the next 3 webinars that we're doing on the proven countermeasures. If you have a local road safety plan, you are also eligible. We talked about this back in November, and we did a webinar. It is recorded if you want to see it. There's also some very good information from the Federal Highway Administration on developing a local road safety plan. And again, we talked about the fact that a lot of you aren't sure. So you want to go and develop a local road safety plan. There's $10 million available to do that. And realize the key is you're going to need to get data. It's data driven. So you're going to need to maybe measure some data. You might go get some qualitative data like how sharp the curve is, or use the curve signs that you already have as a surrogate for the information. And you can use CLEAR, which is, we'll talk about just a second, to collect data that you might not be able to get otherwise. And the CLEAR system is the Crash Location and Engineering Analysis Repository. It replaced the old Accident Location Information System, or ALICE. And just as an example, what you might be able to do with CLEAR is you can go in and look at all the crashes in Lewis County in a 10-year period, which is what we did. And then we realized that's a lot of crashes. So we said, well, how about just the crashes that occurred that are serious or fatals? And you can start focusing in and collecting data to develop a local road safety plan. And you absolutely want to think about doing that if you don't have a local road safety plan. If you have one, you can use the information from that. And one of the questions that was asked in here in the Q&A is, do they expire after a certain period of time, or are they considered outdated? Well, the newer the better. And remember, you're competing with others. And if someone else has a plan that's only 2 years old and yours is 10, they're going to look at that as, well, they got a 2-year plan. They've checked the data more recently, because we know things change, especially coming out of COVID. So you might want to update your plan if it's getting too old and long in the tooth. And then finally, if you have something that's from the list of proven countermeasures, okay, you can use that as a criterion to apply for funds. If you have a plan, you're going to have a stronger application. So you may want to link those two together, and your plan should list the proven countermeasures. And those proven countermeasures can be the ones that are listed in the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, the ones from Federal Highway Administration, or even ones from your own local road safety plan or data-driven local plan. Though I will tell you right now, very unlikely that you're going to find something that's not on one of the two lists from DOT or Federal Highway. So the 17 things that are listed under the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan, there's 16 specific countermeasures, and then the local road safety plans themselves. Everything from rumble strips, shards and cards, to flattening slopes, so people running off the road can have a better chance of recovery. The ones I underlined are ones that are also specifically listed as eligible proven countermeasures from the Federal Highway Administration. So again, you might want to think about that. And we're going to be doing 3 webinars coming up that deal with these in more detail, so you can get a better sense of what's involved. Now, just a few notes to talk about real quick. Remember, the call for funds is for local agencies, MPOs, or tribes. You can bundle them together. We actually recommend that. That actually will help you to put projects together. Up to 95% of the funds or the project can be paid for safety projects. but you got to have a safety component to it, and there are some specifics in the notice for funding applications. You will need to develop a state-local agreement, because remember, these are federal funds tied into this. And if you're in an MPO, you would send that to your MPO. If you're outside of an MPO, you'll send that to your New York State regional office. Okay? Applications are due on June 13th. Okay? So a little bit after the highway school, so you can come to the highway school and then finish up your application. Here's the big thing. Whatever you're going to put in, make sure you justify what you're doing, tying it back to one of those criterion that we talked about. Hotspot, local road safety plan, proven countermeasures. One of the plans are locations that's listed in the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. $90 million. It's not going to cover all of our problems, but it will get us started to improve the local road safety, get everybody home every single day. And again, 10 million specifically set aside for developing a local road safety plan. So do I want to do a project or a local road safety plan? Well, in this case, you could actually do two things. If you have a plan, apply for a development project. So developing a project from your local road safety plan. If you don't have one, apply to develop a local road safety plan. Okay? If you have eligible locations and you have some proven countermeasures you're ready to implement, and you got some time to build up what you can implement, you could apply for an implementation project. Okay? So a perfect example is if you've got curves that need new curve signage, especially if they're required under the new MUTCD, and again, we'll talk about that in the next webinar, then apply for an implementation project and go ahead and start implementing and improving the safety on your system. So just a couple of last quick questions, and then we're going to open it up to your questions and go through the ones you put into the Q&A. What are the 3 crash focus areas from Federal Highway? See if anybody remembers. Roadway departure, that's what we've been talking about. Intersections, very good. Yep. And then the other one, if everybody gets the other one, there's a third one. Pedestrians and bicyclists. Okay, very good. Okay, good job. And then would a rural minor collector, is it eligible for this HSIP call for funds? So the answer, is it eligible? And I'll go ahead and put the responses in there while I clear it. Yes, if it's listed in the Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan. Yes, if it's a hotspot. Yes, if it's part of your local road safety plan. Yes, if it's proving, yeah, it probably is. But the more of the criterion you have, the more your justification, the more you can show a good benefit cost, the more likely you're going to be able to get funds. Okay? So yeah, it could be eligible. It's not going to be eligible in certain cases. So you need to make sure you've read through the plan carefully. Okay? One more question and then we'll open it up. Which is not a roadway departure proven countermeasure? What is not a roadway departure safety action plan proven countermeasure? Improving your curve signs, rumble strips, development of local road safety plan, roundabouts, and a wide and clear zone. They're all proven countermeasures from Federal Highway. So in some respects, you could say they are, but they're not specifically for roadway departures, and that's what they're focused on, is they want the ones that are specifically for roadway departures. So let's see what you guys think. Yeah, roundabouts. Roundabouts are an intersection improvement, okay? So they're not a roadway departure improvement. Everything else is eligible, and so you may want to apply for some funds, okay? And then, it's the kind of thing that you want to make sure you think about a little bit. And time to open it up to questions. So what we have on the call here, and you guys can uncover yourself, and I'm going to find the participation thing. And got to find the right one there. There it is. And You guys want to unmute yourself, and we'll change the list of who's showing. Spotlight for everyone. And I'm going to temporarily hide. Now, actually, no, I'll just go to this next slide temporarily. Again, information on contact information. Okay. So let's try to answer some of your questions that are in the Q&A. Andrew and Robert, are you ready? Is
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is a safety action plan that's been funded through SS4A the same as a local road safety plan?
Yes.
Yeah, that's in. It's data
Yeah.
driven. You're going to be okay. That's the
Yep.
key. Data driven. So that's an easy one. Okay. Why are there more priority segments than secondary? Nope, nope, they're less. They're less. There's only about 2% that are primary.
Right. So the primary are 2 or more standard deviations away from the average.
Mm-hmm.
And the secondary are 1.
Yep. In Yates County, just Yates County, there are more primaries because of the way the math works. But if you zoomed into, say, for instance, Saratoga Springs or Albany, there's a lot more secondaries. In fact, in Ithaca, there's not a single secondary or a single primary. They're all secondaries. So again, a particular area might have a lot of primaries, but that's just the nature of statistics. So, yep.
Right. And just to clarify, we're going to be putting on our viewer potentially. Currently, we just have all hotspots, but they're going to be divided into roadway departure, roadside hotspots, and roadway departure, head-on sideswipe hotspots. So you'll be able to see both because we know that there's specific treatments for each one.
Right. So a proven countermeasure like a centerline rumble strip that's really good for the crossover versus one that's like delineation that would be good for running off the road. Yeah. Must I have a local road safety plan to go after the $90 million of local funding, or does it make it for a stronger application?
No. That's why we did as much analysis as we did, and put out the hotspots and the eligible systemic locations. So if you don't have a local plan or anything like that, then there is some data-driven spots you can choose from.
So you can choose from the spots that were developed. You can choose from the list of proven countermeasures, but you won't be as strong an application. We know that. But I can tell you right now, the one thing you absolutely should do, if you don't have a local road safety plan, apply for one. Remember, there's $10 million specifically to develop a plan.
Yeah, and David, can I just make one clarification about the local road safety plans? If it said if you have one, then that's eligible. But since this is roadway departure funding, um, it really means if you have a local road safety plan that identified roadway departure crashes
Yep.
as an emphasis area,
And
then
and
yeah,
yeah, but your local safety plan, if you're developing it, make sure you include all the emphasis areas because then it will help you for future calls for funds. Because isn't the state also looking at doing plans in the intersection area?
exactly correct. Yeah. Um, yep, that will set you up real good for the future.
And someone asked, and I'll just, I think I know the answer, but go ahead and confirm it. Can you apply for both a local road safety plan and implementing proven countermeasures?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yep.
those are separate little pots of funds in the thing. There are the money was divided up by county, so there are specific pots of money to be divided up in each county. But that's of course just till the application deadline. And then if we don't receive, all requests for all the funds, then we can open it up to some other
Okay.
requests after that.
Someone typed in, are sponsors required to complete a BCA? And my brain is not remembering what a BCA is as part of their application.
I think that's a benefit cost analysis, and
Ah, yes. So that would make sense.
yeah,
B/C is what I usually use, but okay. Yep.
yeah. So not required technically because specifically for the systemic stuff, because there may not be crashes there. And that's the whole point of the systemic is we think there might be a crash there in the future. So the benefit will come in the future. Um, so yeah, not required, but we always say, you know, especially when using clear, you put in the countermeasure, you know, like widen the shoulder or something like that. It'll calculate the benefit cost for you, and that's a very powerful piece of information to include with your application, because that really allows us to compare different projects, different types of projects and things, apples to apples, just to see where we're going to get the most bang for our buck there.
Can you export the data from the action plan viewer to something like a comma separated or Excel file?
Robert Zatowski has GIS files and I guess tabular data too. We could probably provide. I don't think you can download it right from the viewer, but we're happy to give out any raw files people need.
Okay.
Yeah, you can download directly from the viewer, but
Oh,
it's restricted to 1,000 records, so you just have to be aware of that. If you're exporting the entire state, you're only going to get the first 1,000.
Do it by area. If you pick an area that's small enough, you'll be fine.
yeah. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know that. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
There are no specific requirements stating local road safety plans can be tailored regarding roadways evaluated and level of detail put into the plan based on the available target allocation. That's the text. What I think they're asking is, since there's no specific requirement, if you're applying just on one of the proven countermeasures, what level of detail do you need to have to help make your local road safety plan application stronger?
Wait, now I'm confused. I thought the question was if you're just implementing a proven safety
Right.
countermeasure.
Yeah. But how do you make that application stronger if you don't have a local road safety plan?
Oh, if you don't have, well, yeah, as long as it's following the guidance from FHWA on the roadway type and things like that. Uh, and in that case, you know, if it's just a single site project that you're proposing, the benefit cost is going to be essential there. Um, and the PSI information, the potential for safety improvement. Because if we're just picking a spot out of you know, that's not already been identified through that analysis, we need something to show that there are crashes there, and they can be reduced with that countermeasure.
Okay. Now, folks who are here just for the PDHs, we're gonna, you guys can log off and you'll get your PDHs. But if you want to stay on, we have a couple more questions. If you want to stay on to get some clarification, if Andrew and Robert, you got a couple minutes to answer a few more questions for folks?
Oh, you got it, sure.
Yeah, and I actually had a few slides just to clarify kind of some of the things that you're showing, because I know that you're kind of showing a lot of stuff.
Okay, well, tell you what I will do. I'm going to allow you to share just a sec. And it'll let you share your slides, and then we'll see if there's any things that is going on. So that should take care of that. And then I'll stop sharing. You should be able to share now, Robert.
Okay. Oh man.
We
Yeah.
see you see our handout with roadway departure showing. That's what we see. So,
Okay. Excellent.
and just so you know, folks, this is being recorded and will be posted to our website.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you quickly some things from David's handout. So when you look at the handout, you can see it's on page 2. It's the link to our roadway departure safety action plan webpage. So if you click on that, you get to this webpage. And if you scroll down quite a bit, you actually get to the plan that David mentioned and the appendices, and that's where all the data analysis is. And you also get to our new action plan viewer. So if you click on that link, that's what gets you to our new action plan viewer. And that's where the that's where the hotspot analysis is.
Right.
As David said, the primary eligible locations, more than 2 standard deviations, and the secondary eligible locations, which are just 1 standard deviation. And I have the direct link down there, but as you can tell, it's a long link, so we kind of just encourage you to go to that roadway departure main page and just go down a little bit on the page and click on that HSIP action plan viewer link. If you go even further down the page, and I guess I'm always up for feedback on the page, there is a document. It's called Roadway Departure Safety Action Plan Local Call Guidance for Locals. So if you go to that, you'll see this document. That's the cover page. And in that document, there's links to the application form. There's links to the local call contact list. This is just page 1 that I'm showing now. And you'll see that there's the eligibility criteria. So we do have a lot of documentation that's available. It's just a matter of going to this particular page that I have on the screen. So if you go there, you'll see the plan, you'll see the HSIP action plan viewer, you'll see the application, you'll see the list of contacts, whether you're in an MPO or outside of an MPO. We've really tried to make that kind of a one-stop shop. So that that link is on page 2 of the handout that that's been posted to the chat.
Based upon what some people have been asking, would you guys be willing to put a link to all those webinars that we're putting together in one, so it's right there on the same page?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll send you that link.
Yeah.
And then last couple of questions, and then again, I'm going to pop back up to contact information so you guys all have it. Can a local municipality apply for a county or state roadway, be the primary sponsor? Well, yes, for a county road where you bundle with the county, because you'd have to have them sign off. Not for the state highway, that'd be the state who would be doing those, right?
Yeah, and I guess what would be the partnership there? I mean, we have separate funding for the state system for roadway
Right.
departure, so we want to make sure all this funding goes to the locals.
Local system. Yep.
And I
Somebody
think
asked,
we're just
yeah,
funding the specific countermeasures. Like, for instance, if you were going to do a paving and install high friction surface treatments, we would fund the safety component, but not the.
yeah, as I mentioned, that a rehab would not be eligible, but if it had a safety component that was part of it, the safety part would be included. And you definitely need to justify that, include it in the application. Somebody asked, do you foresee any issues getting federal authorization for some of the functional classifications? The answer is no problems at all. I spoke specifically with Federal Highway, and as long as you meet those other criteria, you will not have a problem getting the approval from the feds. They want this going into as many local roads as possible because the funds should be used on any road that's got a safety issue. And then, do you guys have data to show how you develop the hotspot shown on the action plan viewer?
Yeah, we've been asked for that before, and yes, we do have the particular crashes. The report was actually produced in 2021, so the crashes are their crashes from 2014 to 2018. But yes, we
Okay.
can provide, I guess, the points, yes.
Right.
Yeah, and the methodology is spelled out in the the appendices there pretty well.
Okay, and we have one more. It says, if funding is requested for a local road safety plan, does the plan need to look at all local roadways? What are the minimum requirements of what needs to be included for the plan itself? Is the guidance available from FHWA or NYSDOT? A sample plan of the guidance is very detailed.
Yeah, I mean, we are not the experts on local road safety plans. And there's really good information from FHWA and NHTSA, the SS4A grant. You know, anything that you just follow those guidelines for developing the local road safety plan.
If if you-
Should be
if
good.
if you go to page 2 of the handout, which I've put up on screen here real quick, there's a real good stuff in developing plans from FHWA, and then we actually have links to a couple of example ones that people have developed from Chemung County, the St. Regis Mohawks. They did a tribal plan that included both their reservation area and some land around it, as well as there are plans from a whole bunch of other agencies that you might want to look at. So in some respects, I would say I don't think you have to worry at all about that standpoint. So just develop a plan. As for which roads get included, you don't have to do every single road in a particular municipality. The Chemung plan, for instance, only looks at the county and some of the towns in the city of Elmira. But the more you have, the better off you're going to be in terms of possible funding into the future. So, but yes, you can split up by region. And somebody had a question about that regional split of the funds. How's that working, Andrew? You said the funds were split by region.
Well, split by county actually. Um, that was just one of the requirements to make it a non competitive solicitation. So, you know, according to a formula, I think it's based on number of miles and crashes and things like that.
Okay.
We came up with a kind of percentage breakdown, just as a starting point, you know.
Okay. Okay. Um, just a couple of last points to let everybody go. We hope to see you in some of the other webinars
And
that
it
are coming
also
up.
helps to mention that we do have a local programs bureau and we do have a local projects manual. And if you go to that guidance for locals that I showed before, if you go to page 2 of that document, you can find a link to that. So that has additional information on, right, basically what you're showing. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So one of the things we're also doing on May 22nd, we're doing a 3.5 hour plus a half-hour Q&A on the local federal aid process, which includes the USDOT thing to some extent, but primarily for these calls through the HSIP. So you understand the process. So if you've never applied for a grant or have only done for one or two, we really encourage you to show up on the 22nd, and we're going to go through the process, the 10,000-foot overview of the local federal aid process. So you have plenty of time to update your application and get it in to meet all the criteria.
Yeah, and David, if I could just add, you know, this is very focused on roadway departure and everything. The local road safety plan component is obviously, you know, just to help municipalities get that plan in place that's you know, going to tell them where their priorities are, more of the local priorities. Um, but we've also made you know, so that's roadway departure money, but we've also made regular HSIP available to the locals in every region now. The amounts vary, you know, per region, but so you know, when you're thinking about these plans too, also the benefit of getting one of these plans created is then you have a better chance of regular HSIP projects, you know, going forward in the future. Um, and if there's components of a project, you know, that don't meet the roadway departure, but they meet HSIP requirements, then you can kind of mix and match those funds once, you know, you're into the process there.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Someone did ask for a link to where the webinar sign up is. I know we've been having some challenges with our website, Amazon Web Services. So I can't just send you the link to that, but if you Give me about 5 seconds. I'll see if Jody or I can find the link to the direct link so you can just sign up directly via Zoom. Sorry for taking some time here from you.
I know that someone mentioned a question about more of the crash data, and we have been providing a package to some of the MPOs, an ArcGIS Pro map package. So that's something that we can offer to as well.
Yep. Yep. There's lots of different things that we can do. So again, if you have any questions, just send us an email or send one to Andrew. Here, I'll throw my email up there. I can forward it on to whomever needs it. And again, we will get everything working, and you guys are more than able to go into things. And I found,
Yeah, and
aha,
David, we will add all the links to your pages on our page too, so people can get there from there.
yep. And I will put at least the webinar for next week into the chat real quick. And so you guys have that. There's one. There's two. Oh, would help if I did to everybody. I'm just posting them in the chat real quick here, and we'll let everybody go.
If I can share again, David.
Sure. You should be able to now.
Yeah. So like I said, we did try to make this website a one-stop shop. So if you do go to this link, webinar recording, you can get that list. So
I'll tell you what, well, let's do this actually. I will send you guys a link, a Word file that links to the registration so people could just sign up directly and not have to wait. How's that?
yes, whatever's easier.
I'll email that right to you here just now, as soon as we're done. With that, we'll let everybody go. Thanks for hanging on for as long as you did. I apologize for all the craziness here at the end, but hopefully this helped folks out, and hopefully we'll see a whole bunch of you in a week. Okay?
Thank you so much, David.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, and yep, and the next webinar is next Thursday. So we'll see everybody then.